Today, guys, we're going to be taking a look at how you can build a DWC or deep water culture hydroponics bucket for under $50. Now, if you look online, you'll typically find these for about $49.99 to $100, depending on if you're going for a single bucket, a dual bucket, or potentially a quad bucket setup. But today, we're going to go over what you can do to build a hydroponic bucket in your own home, quite cheap, and honestly, guys, it's pretty easy. Now, I will say, before we get into this, there are some things that will make this easier. If you have the correct tools to do this, it's going to be much faster. However, it is a fairly forgiving build in general, so you don't need anything very special overall. But let's get into it, because there are a few things that you will need to get in order to build a deep water cultured bucket setup. And one of those things is, first and foremost, you will in fact need a bucket of some sort. Now, you will probably want to use a dark bucket. As you can see here, we have a blue one. This is to avoid getting as much light, internally speaking, and avoid algae growth, stuff like that. So you want to go with the darkest color you can find. And if you're a real stickler, there are the food grade buckets that are available that have gaskets in the seals. And there's a ton of different things available. But you will need a bucket. Now, these can be found at your local hardware store from anywhere from $3 to $5. And you can go upwards of $10 if you want to buy something like a Rubbermaid bucket, for instance, and do the same project, which may be an idea, especially if you're looking to build one large reservoir instead of multiple reservoirs. But with that being said, you'll also need to typically pick up the lid, which is going to be another $1 or so. So make sure you check that out. I picked these up specifically at Lowe's, and this is probably about $6, $7 for the two pieces. Now, moving forward, you will need to get a few more items as well. And some of those items will include things like some clear PVC or vinyl tubing. As you can see here, this is 1/2-inch internal diameter, and it is very useful. You will need this, so keep that in mind. We'll put that down over here. Now, of course, you will in fact also need a net pot. These are what you're going to grow in, and basically it's going to give you the measurements of what you're going to need to cut in the top of the bucket. So again, keep that in mind. I'm going with a 4-inch net pot. You can go up to about a 6-inch net pot. And also, alternatively speaking, there is in fact net pot tops for 5-gallon buckets. They also fit 3-gallon buckets, but I've had no luck finding any 3-gallon buckets anywhere. Now, moving along, you will also need to pick up an air pump. Now, this is just a simple air pump that you can pick up at your local pet store. It's about a 7.8 liter per minute air pump, so that should be fine for a dual DWC setup. Very awesome there. And of course, you will need some airline tubing as well as an air stone. As you can see here, this is another maybe $2. So now we're up to about $30 total in stuff spent. And of course, two more little pieces that you will need is the elbow, right angle elbow, which this one might be a little bit harder to find. So you're going to be looking for a barbed 90-degree fitting, which will likely be in the plumbing section of your hardware store. And you're going to want to find a similar grommet with a internal diameter that matches this, which is going to be the 1/2-inch mark. So we have a 1/2-inch internal diameter as well as a 1/2-inch internal diameter here. And then you want to make sure you know what your external diameter is so that you can drill a hole in the bucket or get at least as close as possible. Now, if you can't get as close as possible with this, there is a solution to that, as well as we have right here silicone sealant. Now, this is not a glue, okay, guys? A lot of people tend to think that this is a glue. You're not actually going to be adhering anything with this. This is to more or less create a water barrier so that no leaks happen in the event that you do have a leak. This is about $3.50 or so. I think you can get it even cheaper depending on where you live. And of course, guys, if you really want it to be easy and super efficient, you will need a drill with a hole saw kit. 2 different size hole saws, most likely. As you can see here, I have a 4-inch hole saw, and I believe this one is just slightly under an inch. Yes, this is 7/8 of an inch. So as you can see, it pretty much meets up with the exact size of the internal diameter or the external diameter of the grommet, which is what we will need for this build. So those are the items that you got there, and I will put a price list on the screen as to what I paid for these and what you can expect to pay for them within reason. But let's go ahead and get into the build. And luckily enough, in most cases, you'll find at the very top of the bucket in the center, there is actually a mark that's already there, making it pretty easy to find your center point. And this is just coming from the way they mold things when it comes to injection molded items in general. There's always going to be that dot seam kind of situation. Now, the first thing you're going to want to do is drill a pilot hole. Now, you're not going to use a bigger drill bit, and you're obviously going to want to use a drill bit that's going to eat through plastic pretty quickly. And if you don't have a drill for whatever reason and you still want to do this project, you can in fact use a knife and just cut out this area. I would really suggest that you use a utility blade if you were going to use a knife. And again, if you were to use the Lowe's buckets in particular, there is in fact some rings to follow there, which makes it pretty easy. But we're going to go ahead and drill that center point out so that we can get this done pretty easily. And that takes basically no time whatsoever. Now that we've got the center point drilled out and we've got a nice spot that we can already make our entrance with, we're going to go ahead and switch to a 4-inch hole saw. And we're going to go right into that same spot. Once again, you can use other options for this particular setup, but I would suggest a hole saw being the best. Now, secret to a hole saw, guys, is go slower rather than faster. There's really no race to be had here. It's a very small amount of material, and in some of the plastics that you will have, they will shatter if you go too fast. So slower is always better than faster. And just go ahead and work your drill in. Now that we have the hole drilled in there, as you can see, it's perfect. It fits. Our 4-inch snap pot fits perfectly in the hole. So now we have the top of the bucket finished, which means we can move on to our next part, which is where we're going to need the 7/8 inch hole punch here. And we're going to do some big stuff with this one once again. Now, I like mine to be with the actual handle side like this. But we're going to make what is essentially going to be for checking water level. So we're going to go ahead and rock this over on its side. And we're going to find just a little bit up from the bottom here. Just about an inch up from the bottom where the actual bottom lip is. Go about an inch up. Find a nice spot. And that's going to be our location to go next. Now that we've got the hole drilled for our water level and draining system, we're going to go ahead and insert the grommet. Now, once again, if you didn't get the grommet that's the exact same size as your drill, you will need to use some form of sealant. Again, I say to you guys, sealant is not a glue. It is not an adhesive. It is a water barrier. So keep that in mind. Now, I do suggest put it on the hose, okay? So get your hose situated, because this is going to be way easier to do like this with your barb being free and the hose being free rather than on the side of the bucket. And get it onto the second barb. You don't want any leaks. The barbs are there for a reason. If you've ever done PC water cooling, it's the same kind of concept for a soft tubing setup. So get that on there. And then what you're going to do is go ahead and get your grommet inserted in this hole. Now, I do suggest that you go from the back and help it and get it in there and finagle it a little bit. And once it's in there, you're good to go. Once again, you're going to go in from the back side this time and hold the grommet in place and force the barb through to the second barb, all the way into the grommet, so that you are avoiding any type of potential leaks. Go ahead and rotate it up like this. And now you have a water level checking system as well as a drainage system for your DWC. Which leads us to only a couple more steps remaining in this build tutorial, and then your hydroponic deep water culture bucket is ready to go. Now guys, when it comes to your air line, there are a few different options that you can use to actually get your air line into the tank. Now you could do a hole in the upper top lip here, which is what something a lot of people would do. Another option would be just a hole in the top here and feeding the hose through, like 1/4 inch or something like that is what the hose diameter is. What I'm going to do is a little bit different. I have what is known as a cable gland here, and essentially on one side this has a threaded nut that you will drill a hole through and have this sticking out of the top like that. And this actually clamps down and creates a little bit of a seal internally on whatever you have there inside. So that's the option that I'm going to go with, and I'm going to do it in the back of the bucket rather than the front of the bucket. So it will be out of the way and more or less where it needs to be. Once again, use your hole saw nice and slow. Don't go fast. Slower is better. As you can see, it goes through no problem. And once again, you're going to want to buy the right size stuff for this. Otherwise, it will not work quite as well as you would like it to. But there is a lot of forgiveness when it comes to a DWC bucket build. So I'm going to go ahead and insert this nut on the back here and just show you how this works out when it's all said and done. And then we will have a finalized DWC bucket ready to get some plants going. Now, if you guys have been following along, you now have a totally functioning deep water culture hydroponic system of your own. And it should have cost less than $50. Now, I honestly bought a bunch of other materials to build this in bulk, and it still cost less than $50 for all the materials that I acquired. Now, you will need a few other things to actually grow in your hydroponic system. You will need some rock wool. You will, in fact, need some clay pebbles, and you're likely going to need some nutrients of your choice. But that's a lot of stuff for another video. Today, we were focusing on building the bucket and how you can get up and running for under 50 bucks. And hopefully this video will help you out. And remember to like, comment, and subscribe down below to help the channel out and be informed about next videos that we have coming out that will actually feature these hydroponic buckets and some awesome grow information, as well as potentially sharing our feeding schedule that we experiment with our new hydro setup. So you guys enjoy the videos that we put out over the next few months and over the next few grows. But thanks for watching, thanks for liking, and thanks for subscribing. Don't forget to stay safe, stay healthy, and have a good one.